Transitional keyboards are a new tool that can be used to accelerate a student's skill and learn to improvise, and introducing it to children at a much younger age. One of the quickest ways to effectively attain basic to moderate improvisation skills is through the GarageBand app, which can be uploaded on most Apple devices for free. This presentation will explain how you can use the gray keyboard in the track side of GarageBand to isolate only the keys that are needed to sound good with any given song or other improvisation resource. Think of GarageBand's gray keyboard as technology's version of an Orff instrument on steroids. In addition, the GarageBand app offers several different challenge levels by controlling the number of keys you allow your students to use when improvising. The fewer the keys, the less chance a soloist will play an incorrect sounding key or pitch. In this way, the gray keyboard allows teachers to easily differentiate the specific improvisation skill level each soloist will use by his or her choice of possible scale formats available. Even a beginner can rapidly improve his or her improvisation skills by listening to their peers model improvisation soloing at more advanced levels. The transitional keyboard format sequence is normally as follows. First, pentatonic scales. Second, the blues scales. Third, major and minor scales, also including modes. Level 4 is transitioning from the gray keyboard to the transitional black and white piano keyboard in GarageBand, and Level 5 is how to use the all-in-one color-coded keyboard overlay maps, which I will cover in my next presentation. Instruction starts with an explanation of what syncopation is and the introduction of the no skipping rule when improvising. Our first goal is to focus on creating or shaping an interesting improvisation melody rhythmically. We can focus on rhythmic construction since our potential note selection is predetermined by the scale format which the teacher has chosen for the particular soloist. The riskier notes are gradually added only when the teacher feels the class or each individual student is ready for them. In order to create an interesting rhythmic solo, the child must first refrain from using a steady diet of what I refer to as pulse and downbeat/upbeat rhythms. This is where an understanding of the definition and application of syncopation comes into play. If your students already understand what syncopation is and can create random examples of syncopated rhythms on the spot, you're ready to move on. I like to introduce the no skipping rule using some kind of game format. I find this is especially useful with younger students. The non-skipping rule is emphasized in order to anchor our students on which notes will sound more familiar and pleasant to the listener's ears. 90 to 95% of most musical motion in our Western culture is diatonic in nature. So, let's start there. The no skipping rule is that for a student to move up or down the keyboard, he or she can move one neighbor to the right, one neighbor to the left, or stay on the same key. Normally, I use a game called Smackdown, which I talked about in my first YouTube video, and will probably go back and revisit it in a later presentation. So, we now have only notes that will sound good with our improvisation solos, along with a wide range of possible notes and melodic directions to choose from. With the key or note limitations initially imposed on our young soloists, the only thing left for them to do is to focus on creating interesting rhythms for their solos. By this time, some kind of introduction to GarageBand must have taken place. Teacher can use the Find the Icon game, also on my website or by request, or some other method to help students find the My Songs projects library and how to basically move around in the track side of GarageBand. I will normally use the Match My Picture approach to help children find the keyboard window in the instrument selection screen. and then how to set up the correct key and scale format for the song I initially wish them to solo with. In the pentatonic format, which is the first gray keyboard we will use, you will notice there is only 1 dark gray and 4 light gray keys in each octave. Limiting the number of keys which students have to think about makes the new instrument we are asking them to play look simple and less intimidating. At this time, there's no need to talk about any theory. You're just playing a game designed for your children to have fun and help develop their ears. Next, I will briefly talk about scales as a means of reinforcing the no skipping rule. It's kind of like your postman when he delivers the mail. I then will ask the class, now would it be fair if your postman delivered all the mail to everyone on your street and skipped your house? Of course not. So when we play our game, you can go back and forth as many houses as you wish. However, be sure you don't skip any houses, because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. For the most part, that seems to reinforce the concept and tends to resolve the skipping problem. When improvising, if a student does play a note that sounds out of place, immediately play the next adjacent key to the right or left, and you will arrive on a note that will sound harmonically correct. The misstep will simply sound like an accented passing tone or a grace note, not a mistake. It's now time to tie in the concept of same and different. I will ask the children to play a solo and try to trick the rest of the class by changing note directions when they don't expect it. Students initially tend to go all the way up, then all the way down their keyboards, unless they are encouraged to change their direction at random times. However, I will say, you cannot change your direction at the same place the child before you did. Your solo must sound different from the others. I also use this exercise to check the students individually and be sure that they have mastered the no skipping rule. In future classes, I will have students come up front and model playing a solo, along with a recording, on my big board. I took a science project board and made it into an adaptable iPad keyboard that I used to feature students with in front of the classroom. Big board obviously makes no sound, but instead the class watches a soloist improvise on the large keyboard using a red wooden spoon to represent his or her performing finger. After each student finishes, I ask the class to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether the soloist who just performed skipped or not. In Level 2, with the second gray keyboard, I initially talk a little bit about the blues and play some examples. I explain that for this next keyboard, we are only going to add 1 key to our improvisation solos, the blues note. For now, we will continue our soloing using the no skipping rule. If students had trouble identifying by sound which key is the blues note prior to working with the second gray keyboard, they almost all can nail it when we finish. Normally, this is as far as I take the younger children with improvisation. After that, we'll learn how to use a keyboard map in order to play a song. I initially choose Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with the younger students to see how many students can figure out, on their own, how to decode a regular-sized key map. Rather than note names, we will initially read and practice the song using the key numbers as they are labeled on the student's key map. Since most kindergarten students are confident with their numbers, this will make communication a lot simpler and develop basic decoding skills a lot faster. We start off playing the song on the paper map itself, and then transfer the performance onto the iPad keyboard. Later on, I will pass out the overlay size map to the students who still seem to be struggling with the song. In order to use the keyboard overlay maps, they need to be duplicated and cut, 1 per participant, before handing them out. Cut along the bottom border as close as you can. How much of the paper is above the key map doesn't matter. Do not cut the sides of your map, though, because the children will use one hand to securely hold the map in place so it will not slide around, and the other hand to play his or her music. Encourage your students to only use their pointer finger on one hand in order to avoid skipping. Be sure they never play a solo with their thumb. I have also on occasion used masking tape to temporarily secure the paper map onto the iPad case itself. This will be a big help to the younger children because of their small hands. Now have the students place the overlay map on his or her iPad screen. The maps are cut a little short widthwise, so the bottom part of the screen, just below the map itself, is exposed. It is important that your students line up the vertical lines on their key map exactly with the vertical lines on the exposed part of their iPad screen. When using an overlay sheet, students will always remain on their present screen. For that reason, be sure the middle button in the center bar is set at glissando and not at scroll. This will prevent the screen from accidentally moving around while the children are playing their solos. In my Match My Picture mode, I will ask the class, what do we need to do in order to make your iPad screen and keyboard overlay map look exactly like mine? The class will then hopefully come up with the key elements needed to make theirs look like mine. Getting back to Twinkle Twinkle, I will ask the students using the overlay sheets to actually touch the numbers on their paper map as they play. If the overlay map is correctly lined up with their GarageBand screen, they should be able to perform the song fairly quickly. With a little more work, most of the class should be able to play the song along with the recording. We may even set up an ABA format situation and apply what we learned earlier about improvisation and run solos in the B section in order to tie the two units together. In our third level, the major and minor scales are our third grade keyboard, which I will get to after I've introduced the sounds of major and minor tonality to the class. Once again, it's all about the ear and playing or improvising with these grade keyboards to help reinforce the concept of the sound difference between major and minor scales or keys. Around the same time, I also like to introduce the different sounds of rock and swing/blues styles to students. I will use the Scale Patterns for Practice sheet along with the grade keyboards to help do this. For some songs, the patterns written may not work. For most, however, they do. Note, songs using modal improvisation will use a similar grade keyboard and the same scale patterns for practice as the major and minor keyboards. Initially, I have the full class or ensemble play through the scale patterns in the style I designate by itself. I then like to have them play through the same exercise during the song's introduction. When the main body of the song begins, I will select one student to be the opening soloist. After a while, I will select other students to take turns soloing as the song continues. If the class or ensemble has headphones, I might also have everyone begin improvising simultaneously after the introduction. The advantage of using headphones is that your students can rehearse a variety of different scale formats at the same time. For level 4, I will design a level 3 key map that will fit on top of the traditional black and white keyboard in GarageBand. Students start on the tonic and play only the black or white keys revealed on his or her key map. Always skip over the gray ones. Using these maps and their ears, I really feel this could potentially give all our future vocalists and instrumentalists a great foundation in differentiating scale formats and their sounds. As you expose your students to additional improvisation audio resources and a variety of different jazz and pop styles, you'll be amazed at their progress in a relatively short amount of time. Enjoy the new school year, have fun, and be safe.